Hey everyone, today is a special video for me because it's a video that's kind of been a long time coming. Some of you know that earlier this year I lost a dear friend and brother, and I had taken a little bit of time off of YouTube to mourn. And I had a few of you kind of reach out to me. And there was one who reached out and they said they do these kind of tributes or whatever. And I appreciated them doing that. I really did, but kind of just wanted to do this on a personal level. I wanted to keep it more personal. And now that I've gotten the channel up to the point to where it is, and I didn't do that really, you guys did, but I wanted to tell you about him, because he's integral to my journey in tabletop RPGs. So this one's gonna be off the top of the dome. There's no script. I'm just gonna tell you about my friend, James G. King. So let's start at the beginning. It was back in the 1980s, and I've told you guys this before. I had just discovered tabletop RPGs. I needed somebody to play with. Now, I lived in a trailer park, and we were in the middle of nowhere. Hear me? I mean, we were like, there was like a Chrysler car factory across the street, and that was about it. Everything else was just like wide open. Today, it's got all kinds of development, but back in the day when I was living there, there was zero out there. We lived right across from a field of corn. Like, I can literally walk across to the field of corn in less than 20 seconds. It was that close. It's ridiculous. We lived way out in the middle of nowhere. He had 3 streets in this trailer park. Well, Jim lived behind us on the 2nd street over a couple trailers. So I could leave my house, go to the back, and get to Jim's house in less than 30 seconds. He lived that close to me. I forgot exactly how me and Jim met, and I think it was at the pool, because this trailer park had a pool. I'm pretty sure it was at the pool. But I started playing tabletop RPGs in my house. This is right after I had discovered Marvel Superheroes Basic. And I was like, I am on cloud 9. I need to play this game. So after understanding, how exactly it played, I had a couple people come over. I forgot who the other person was, but I remember Jim. Jim was there at the very beginning with me in my tabletop RPG journey. And he came over to my crib and we started playing Marvel. First thing, of course, that you have people do is you have them roll up characters. So I had him roll up his character. Check this out, folks. I still have his character. The character that he rolled up. Now, back in the day, we didn't have computers like we have them today. So I had a manual typewriter, and he had his character, and there it is. There's his character. That's his original character that I typed up on a manual typewriter. The name was Tornado. I love telling this story. And it was part of a group that I made up called The Naturals. And everybody had some kind of elemental superpower, right? So he was called Tornado, so guess what his was? You guessed it, air. So we started playing Marvel, and Jim was great. And I remember Jim and don't remember the other person. I still don't remember the other person. I don't know if it was his brother or not. I can't remember. But Jim, every time that he wanted Tornado to do something, he would put his hands together like this and put his fingers together like this. And he would go, okay, I'm going to do like this. And he would do that like every time he wanted to use the power. He was just like, I want to do this like this or whatever. Okay, he's younger than me at this point, or forever, right? He's younger than me. But I understood what he was doing. And I just got a kick out of it. he's expressing himself in the way that he wants to, but I could kind of see what was in his mind. And he's using his whole body to do this. And so in a sense, that is role playing to a degree. And I'm like, okay, that is really, really cool. And it was right then that we started playing tabletop RPGs together, and we played several others. We played the game that I refuse to mention by name on this channel. We played Twilight 2000. We played Star Wars. We played all these games together. But Jim's jam was always fantasy. That was his jam. It wasn't my jam. And so we even kind of disconnected from one another because I formed a group to play Marvel after Marvel Advance came out, and he was still playing the game I refuse to mention by name on this channel. But we would get together every once in a while to play other games. I remember he got together with me to make up some Traveler stuff. We went through a little bit, but we didn't go much further than that. I think he even did some Gamma World stuff as well. So he was there at the very beginning of my tabletop RPG journey. But then years passed, we graduated, and since he was younger than me, he hung out with a different crowd. And so we kind of separated. We were still hanging around one another because we still lived in the same trailer park. So we still saw one another, and we still played tabletop RPGs together, but not as much. And then we got even older, and then we just separated. We didn't see each other for a while. And then I moved to a certain suburb area here in the place where I live, and I did not know that Jim lived across the street from me in the apartment complex, and somehow I found out. So I used to go over to his crib. Hey, what's going on, man? And so we had a connection there for a quick minute. They separated again because he moved to Wisconsin. But he would call me every once in a great while. I'd hear from him. And then finally, he moved back to this area, but he moved way out. So he moved about half an hour from where I stay here. So it wasn't 35 minutes, something like that. And we would talk now, and we were talking all the time. Now, back in the day, when we were going our separate ways, I was hanging out with his brother. So I still saw Jim quite a bit. And I would go over to his house still, but I was hanging out with his older brother. His older brother was only 1 year younger. And so we would go out and do things together. But Jim would go out with his friends and do things. But it wasn't until we got connected back together again that, we started talking about things. This is when he really got into WoW. And I couldn't stand that game and still don't. So, I tried playing that game one time and I was like, this is horrible. So I just didn't play. But he played that game for a long, long time, and he had gotten out of tabletop RPGs. And I was going back into tabletop RPGs after a small hiatus. And so Jim and I would talk about tabletop RPGs, and Jim was this guy, he had this big heart. He always wanted everybody to get along, right? He had a big heart like that. And I was the optimistic realist kind of guy. I was like, that's nice, but that's not going to happen, right? He'd get upset and get frustrated because I would say things like that because he just had this big heart. Oh man, you're so negative. Oh, I said, I'm not being negative. I said that it would be nice. I just know that it's not because I know human beings. So we would go back and forth on that stuff, but we still talked. And it was during this time that we began to really become close. Now, he was just going into being a truck driver. And I don't know why he did that, because he loved the outdoors. He loved being outdoors. He went down to Hocking College, which is in Southern Ohio. He went there, and I was like, man, why didn't you pursue that? And we had long conversations about that. I'm not going to get into details. But that's what he loved. So he loved the outdoors. He wasn't a techie like me. I'm a techie, but he was more into fishing and hunting and nature, always had been. Probably one of the reasons why he was so into fantasy. And that boy read fantasy books like no one's business. I mean, he read fantasy book after fantasy book after fantasy book. That boy kept his nose in that stuff. And he branched off later on into other books, but it would always sometimes have like a historical fantasy or a historical medieval novel or something like that. Sometimes he'd go a little bit off of the ranch from his normal roaming, but he stayed in that fantasy thing. And me, that wasn't my deal. Jim was very giving. Now the hat that I'm wearing right now, that's his. This is his hat, which is why I'm not matching. And this shirt right here, he bought it for me for my birthday. And he had a big heart like that. And when I kept in touch with him, even though he wasn't into tabletop RPGs, and I kept trying to get him into tabletop RPGs again, and he had this job where I think you went, and it was kind of like a salvage place where you went to some people's houses and they threw out stuff or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but he was always getting all this stuff. And so he gave me like all these games. He gave me all these comics because, I collect comics. So he gave me these comics. He was always thinking about me. That's the kind of guy that he was. And I was always talking to him about getting back into tabletop RPGs. And I was like, dude, you really need this, because some people need it. And I believe tabletop RPGs can be a great tool for mental health if used properly. And I was saying to Jim, because he'd be stressed out, I'm like, bruh, you need to get back into tabletop RPGs. And at first, I think he thought that I was just trying to, get him to play. But I was like, no. I really believe you need to get back into tabletop RPGs for your sanity. I really do. So we would have these long discussions. And we've had long discussions about RPG philosophy. And of course, I was developing at that time, this is around 2008 or so, the RPG Elite philosophy. He would be like, oh man, I wouldn't do that. And I'd be like, I have to do that. It's that I can't not do that. You understand what I'm saying? And so again, we were on the opposite ends of the spectrum when it came to that. He wants to include everybody because he wants everybody to get along. And I'm like, hey, I want everybody to get along, but I ain't including everybody, because everybody, that's living in a dream world. And that's exactly what I would say. And he would get upset. And so we'd have these conversations about these things. Man, I miss that dude. Gosh. Okay. In my bid to get him to play tabletop RPGs, I got him to come over one time, make some Gamma World character, and he hadn't done it for a long time, hadn't been in tabletop RPGs for a long time. And he got a taste of it. And after we did all that, he was like, man, I really enjoyed that. I was like, see? It's like, I'm telling you, you need this. And then there was a long stretch of time in between. He didn't do anything, and I tried to get him back over. And then he finally got an itch for it, and he started playing a game I refuse to mention by name on this channel. But he was playing with some other people who I would not play with, probably in any game. I'd had an experience with them, so I wouldn't play with them again. But he had helped me out in my game also. I am in the background here creating 2 games. And in one of these games, he helped me out. And he helped me test it out in the very beginning stages, and he helped me test it out again. I had 2 runs for this. So he was there. He was there willing to support me. So he moved out of town again. And now he's in Dayton. So he's way far away from where I'm at. But we always talked. And it was throughout these years that we just became closer and closer and closer. Jim's way of saying how close we were, he said, You my brother from another mother of a different color. I loved it. I was like, for shazy. And one of the things I used to do when he would call or I would call him and he would answer, it just tickled him to death every time that I did it. He'd answer and I'd be like, Jimmy! Jimmy King! And he loved it. He would always laugh when I did that. It would always just brighten his mood just for a little bit. And I miss saying that, man. Really do. One of the things I talked to him about as well, quite a bit, was the Lord Jesus Christ. You see, in that time when we had disconnected is when the Lord got a hold of me. So when we reconnected again, it wasn't quite the person that Jim had grew up with. And so I talked to him about that. And over time we had talked about it, and we would go back and forth because he'd be like, oh, no, this is this. And I would be like, no, it's not that. And we would go back and forth with that. And years that we did that. And I prayed for him. I would regularly pray for him. So he moves to Dayton and he calls me up one day and he is different. I know Jim. He's not sounding the same. And he's just talking and I'm just letting him talk. And this was a different Jim. This Jim was the Jim that the Lord Jesus Christ got a hold of. Now, he didn't know much. He didn't know, he just got into this. What is this? But you can hear him and you hear it in his voice. I heard it. I knew the difference because he had come to my church a couple of times. My wife had asked, you think that he's saved? And I was like, nah, he ain't got it yet. He ain't got it. You know the difference. And when he called me, man, I was like, Lord, you did it. And so that was a great time. And it took, because we talk about this over the next year. That was wonderful. That was fantastic. If there's anything that I wanted him to get, it was that, because that's the most important thing to get. Earlier this year, in February, I got a text message from his wife. Now understand something. I'm going to be nice. Me and his wife don't get along. At all. So when I saw that text message, I knew something was up. And my heart just dropped even before I called her back. Because I just knew. And I had been trying to get a hold of Jim for weeks. Wouldn't answer my calls. I don't know what was going on. And I got a phone call that he was gone. Or actually, I made the phone call. And my brother from another mother of a different color had left this plane of existence. And I think about him all the time. And when I do, I'm just like, man, I miss him. And people say, oh, with time it heals. Time never heals anything. Time just allows you the ability to accept it. That's all. Geez, my mom died in 2013 and I still have dreams about her. So I wanted to just let you guys know that a big-hearted man that was in my life and was my brother all around had left this place. And I miss him dearly. So this video is a tribute to my friend, James G. King. Man, if you've got a friend like that, that has kind of been there with you, and you lose them, you know what I'm talking about. But I wanted to do something. And so this is my tribute. And I'm keeping this video up forever. And I'll keep this video and put it up wherever I can. These relationships that we form in tabletop RPGs, they become very important. Sometimes they become as important as the one that me and Jim formed. Cherish them. We got one go around, folks. That's it. You got one life to live. There's no reincarnation. We don't do that. Fiction, all of that. Bible talks about it is appointed unto man once to die and then the judgment. So you got one time. That's all you got. Cherish it. And actually live it, folks. Live, because you just never know when your card gets pulled. So I'm going to sign off here, folks. I want to thank you. And I'm going to sign off for Jim. And thank you so much for watching. And now, folks, I got to exit stage left. But before I do, next time we see each other, God willing, I'll catch you on the flip. Until then, Jimmy! Jimmy King! God bless.